Alright, so with this new event over on the JP version of the game, Shirou Amakusa has now had all of his skills and his NP buffed, and I would argue is borderline a must-summon unit at this point. Just jumping right into this, looking at his hits, they might not seem all that impressive. You're like, alright, 3 hits on 1 quick card, he's not really a star gen servant, he's not really here to be genning NP. But his NP gain is quite high, it's very close to 0.9, and he has 2 hits on 2 arts cards, meaning his NP gain is going to be rather good. But then there's just kind of this little crazy detail that I think people tend to overlook when we're looking at Shirou Amakusa, and that is his extra hit, which is 7 hits, dude. And if you guys are, long time viewers of the channel, right, or, long time, but, you've watched a few of my videos, 5 hits is the gold standard. Like, 5 hits is good, 6 hits is great, 7 is busted. It's way too good. And it used to be, okay, well, he has 7 hits on his extra, it doesn't really matter. But with all of these buffs that he's been getting, it just makes him absolutely nuts to butts broken. So looking at his first skill, it gives him 10 stars for 3 turns, right? Which is, kind of average. That's not like super great or anything, right? But it also gives 30% NP gen for 3 turns as well on a 6-turn cooldown. And the best part is, it's targetable. So like Shirou Amakusa, whose NP gain is already good enough as is, he might not even want to use this on himself. You could slap this on somebody else, right? You could slap this on your arts or quick servant that might need that little buff to give them just that little extra bit of NP gen to make them work, which that is insane, because this makes Shirou Amakusa like one of those servants you'll run in your team comps, because he drops the powerful NP gain thing onto his allies. It's like very similar to Paracelsus, right? How Paracelsus is in a lot of these like looping compositions because he gives a very powerful NP gain buff and he gives arts, which is something, Amakusa is not giving like that good of a buff, right? But I think this is like almost invaluable for art servants, right? Because art servants don't innately drop stars. They can't do it. Their cards are just incapable of doing so. And you have to buff them with star drop rate or something so they can actually drop stars. But Amakusa kind of goes around that, right? He says, well, here's the NP gain, and here's just a guaranteed 10 stars every single turn. So you at least have some star gen guaranteed per turn, which is really insane. Like this first skill is already like super good. But then there's his second skill, which I talked about in my last video. This is just absolutely broken. So now it reduces one enemy's NP gauge by 1, which is very good for challenge quests, because being able to control when your enemy's NP is very powerful, right? It's good for stalling and like just giving yourself that little extra bit of time. It's very powerful. He has an AoE 20% debuff for Buster Resistance for 5 turns, which is, I need that to just like soak in, that it is a 5-turn debuff, right? Like you could loop this with other people's, right? Like it's insane. This is redonkulous. Like normally skills, their effects only last 3 turns. This lasts 5 turns. It's 5 turns where your Buster cards are just going to do extra damage for free. Then he now gives himself 20% NP just for free, immediate battery, and then for 5 turns he's going to give himself 20% NP regen. So that means at the end of every turn he's going to give himself an additional 20% NP. What this means is Shirou Amakusa can almost like loop his NP very easily. Not immediately, right? But it's like every other turn you could very realistically be getting his NP back off. I wouldn't even be surprised if there were like specific team comps that allowed him to get his NP back every single turn, especially if you got like Amakusa's arts cards or something, because his arts cards are going to be like 20 to 30% NP depending on crit or something, if you're able to just get those every single turn. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some specific builds that give Amakusa the ability to just loop his NP, which is what I've been talking about for Buster Servants for the longest time, like how they need to have someone who can loop. Well, Amakusa's the man, baby. Like, he's here to do it, or at least make a very solid attempt at it. Then there's his third skill, which has a 100% chance to stun a servant for 1 turn, which is good. That's fine. The fact that it's just like any servant, that's good. But what you're really going to use this for is you're going to use it for the 30% buster buff for 3 turns, which basically this combined with his now buffed second skill is going to increase the amount of damage that Amakusa was going to do, which we'll get to his NP, but they did not need to give this dude damage on top of everything that he already does, because at this point it's like Amakusa does so much. He provides stars, he gives NP gain, his NP is very self-sufficient between his own hits and how much NP he can just give himself. He can control the enemy's NP and stun them. He has a long-lasting buster debuff to all enemies, and then he can also buff his own buster damage as well. Everything he does is very insane, and even though his cooldowns might be a little long, the effects lasting as long as they do makes up for the long cooldown. And while we might think that his passive skills are a little underwhelming because he just has one, it is still a just innate 20% chance to just neg any debuff, which is very powerful. If you think of it, it's a 1 in 5 chance to just avoid a stun, a charm, a debuff of any type. You know, it's very powerful. But then there's his NP, which, look, we'll just say, okay, the overcharge of reducing enemies' critical attack chance, it starts at 30%, dude. Which even that's really good, because that's a 30% chance to not have to take a critical hit. And remember, Shirou Amakusa is a ruler, so against like 90% of the game, he already has high damage reduction against them, because he just has this type advantage towards them, right? So already, the only way they'd be able to damage him is to just do like big crits, right? And they can't even do that now. But here's the powerful thing. His NP removes all enemies' buffs, and it activates first, and it's AoE, meaning there's no running, there's no hiding, there's no blocking, there's no nothing you can do to Shirou Amakusa. You're not getting around it, you're taking this damage. You can't stack a whole bunch of defense, because he removes your defensive buffs and then hits you. You can't put up a guts, because he removes your guts and then hits you, right? And then you just die. You can't dodge. You can't use invincibility. You can't even use solemn defense. There's nothing you can do. The only thing that you can possibly do is use the anti-buff removal buff, right? Which is very, very, very uber specific, right? It's very rare for like a lot of servants to actually have that. So this makes Shirou Amakusa's NP very good. And in fact, before he got his buffs, that was like his only redeeming factor, is that you could bring Shirou Amakusa as just like a buff cleanser, right? But now his NP has been buffed, so it does more damage, still keeps the ridiculously good effect, helps him survive by reducing enemy crit chance, right? Then he has a double buff for his damage, can easily get his NP back, can actually act as a support for arts and quick teams, which he's not even a part of, but he can help buff them, right? And it just makes him a borderline must summon unit. There's just like very few flaws I can even poke in this unit, because it's like, okay, well, he doesn't have like maybe a standard attack buff, right? But you're gonna run him with either Merlin or Waver, and they're gonna give him the attack buff. He doesn't have innate crit damage, but again, Waver and Merlin, the people you're gonna run him with anyway, are going to give him that crit damage. And then it's like, what else does he have? He doesn't have a defense buff maybe, but he's a ruler. He doesn't need the defense buff, because the only enemies in the game that are gonna be doing damage to him are gonna be Berserkers and Avengers, but he's gonna actually be able to do damage back to those Berserkers, right? And then you're just not, why would you bring him to an Avenger fight anyway? Why would you even do that, right? That just makes no sense. I guess like you can't use him for some of those Avenger battles, right? You don't bring him against Lobo and Shinjuku, right? I guess don't do that. But aside from that, it's like, where are the flaws in this unit? I'm trying to think, I'm trying to just think of some reason, because even me personally, I'm thinking about going in and summoning for him on JP, but I just feel like there's something crazy around the corner, right? Because now, like, this is around the time that Kama dropped, you know, this is when we got, like, the Oko event, and so it's like, surely there's something crazy right around the corner. I mean, it's like a game like Dokkan dropping, like, Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, and you're like, okay, surely there's something crazy coming around the corner if you're gonna drop this gargantuan unit here, and you're just gonna buff this dude. Like, what's around the corner, dude? It's like, if you summon for Shirou Amakusa, you go balls deep. I completely understand. Even, okay, here's even a thing. His NP damage is quite low, right? He's the lowest damaging ruler. I know the chart says that he's above the free-to-play Sambakets, but that's the thing. She's free-to-play, so you're going to actually look at her at NP5, because you more than likely have her at NP5. You should have her at NP5, because she was free-to-play, right? But even then, it's like, why would you even use the other ones over him? Like, why would you use Sambakets over Shirou Amakusa? Unless you just really like Sambakets, why would you use her? She's inferior in, like, literally every single way. There's just quite literally nothing that she does better. So it's just like, why would you use them? Ruler Artoria is a servant that I really, really like, right? I'm very, very biased towards her, but I'm like, And I think she's really, really good, but there's just nothing that she does better. So, with that being said, I mean, you gotta go summon for this dude, man. He's insane. He's absolutely nuts to butts broken. So let me know how your summons go in the comments down below, or are you gonna be kind of in the same camp as me, where I'm gonna be kind of holding my courts a little bit, because I'm like, if they're gonna drop a guy like this, what is around the corner? So, very hopeful for the future of FGO, very hopeful to see what new unit we're gonna get around the corner. Maybe it's going to be a Lost Belt 6, maybe that's what they're gonna drop, and we're gonna get something like, I don't know, Grand Lancer Lancelot, King of the Fairies or something. I don't know, he's just gonna be broken. But with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late guys.